We are down to one, down to the final game of the season. The national championship has been set. And what a pair of college football semifinal games we just witnessed no more than 24 hours ago. Uh, and we're going to talk about it here in the college football CFP, the Transfer Portal CFP podcast here with my guy, Josh. Josh, how you doing?
Uh, Not gonna lie, Brian, I was stressing, Husky fan. And even though
Yeah.
not even just that, just coming off the Rose Bowl, not like the most well played game, but it was just a slugfest. And I mean, we went to overtime and it was fun. So going right from that, and it was kind of funny watching that going straight into the Sugar Bowl because there was the delay. They had to wait for the kickoff, and then it was like Rose Bowl ends, immediately cut to interview the coaches right before kickoff for the Sugar Bowl. So there wasn't that much time for me to breathe, and relax. So I'm still recovering. Uh, but I mean, it was fun, and can't believe I'm gonna be watching the Huskies play in a national championship game, in a week.
Yeah.
It's wild to think about that. Never thought I'd be here.
The Huskies definitely they've stayed alive all year, and hasn't always been pretty, but they're the ones, with the more points at the end of the game, and that's all that matters. Regardless of what how they get there, they've gotten there, and they've made their way to the national championship. But before we talk about the Huskies, thrilling win over the Longhorns, let's talk about uh almost like it, and I hate to kind of treat one of these as bigger or more important than the other, but the Rose Bowl, especially the semifinals at the Rose Bowl, always seems just like the main event. You have Fowler, you have Herb Street, it's the Rose Bowl, just the game day is there. It just seems just like a more majestic, more important game. And it just felt like that. Every single play had so much weight to it. Between Alabama and Michigan. Michigan was ranked number one. It definitely felt that Alabama was kind of just given the benefit of the doubt by most people, definitely by me. It just felt like it was another Alabama, Nick Saban, um, you know, pull it out of their ass year where they just end up winning the national championship, even though it looked like they were not that good in the large chunks of the season. But um, that did not happen. Michigan finally, after back-to-back years, after humiliating losses, to be completely blown out by Georgia a couple years ago, and last year the kind of just get outplayed by TCU, who many thought was not a very strong player in the college football playoff last season. They went out there and definitely took care of Michigan pretty convincingly. So for Michigan to come back and beat the mighty Tide and Nick Saban, it was definitely a big deal. What is your main takeaway from the game on Monday night?
Yeah, so I wrote the previews for both games, and in my preview for I wrote like each side how each team would win, how they would have to win. For Michigan, I wrote that McCarthy would have to have JJ McCarthy would have to have the game of his life, and he didn't. Plus, Michigan didn't play a clean game, and to beat Alabama, we're so used to it. It's so beaten into our heads that you have to play your A+ game, and Alabama has to slip up. Alabama slipped up, of course, but it was caused by Michigan. Um, but and at the same time, Michigan didn't play well. And like McCarthy, yes, he was like 17, 27, 200 something yards, 3 touchdowns, two really short touchdowns, which were schemed plays wide open. And the other one was a short dump off pass where the guy took it and ran it down for like, it was a 38-yard touchdown. And I think the guy ran for 30 yards. So, and McCarthy again, that interception at the beginning of the game, which wasn't by inches, that throw to Roman Wilson on the game tying drive, where thankfully, because it was tipped and McCarthy threw it late, it wasn't an interception. Instead, it was caught by Wilson. Um, but yeah, it was crazy to see that at the end of it, Michigan came out on top. Um, and that's just people are gonna say, oh, and myself included, they haven't played a great schedule. Uh, Penn State, they beat Penn State, but Penn State's overrated. They beat Ohio State, but Ohio State, and there's all the talk about Ryan Day being bad. But at the end of the day, it's like Michigan, Michigan, just their coaching, has put them in this position, and I wrote a few years back about how the recruiting at Michigan has gotten up and up since Harbaugh came, of course, and I said that that's gonna raise their floor. And I thought that, hey, I don't know if they could raise their ceiling, but the floor being raised would certainly help them. And I thought that it helped them more when the playoffs expanded, that they'd be in the playoffs all the time now because they're for sure going to get in because they have such a high floor. They're not going to lose more than 2 games in the Big Ten. But we saw that the raised floor helped them in this game, where again, they didn't play that well. And yes, Alabama didn't play well on the other side, but it's also because Michigan caused them to do that. And at the end of the day, the Wolverines, who under Harbaugh 0-6 in the postseason, including, like you said, the two very different but same storyline, just disappointing playoff performances. The Wolverines in the national championship, and
Yeah.
I think we have nothing else to say. But I mean, if you want to joke and say, "Oh, they cheated," but like at the end of the day, you got to play on the field. You got to know what you're doing, and they did. And so it was really really impressive to see Michigan, even though Alabama almost pulled it out at the end because they always do. You and I in the
Yeah.
chat, just like, oh, here goes the Alabama thing. You and I were the only ones. I mean, not the only ones, but like in our chat during the Iron Bowl, we're like, hey, Alabama's
They're
gonna
gonna score.
score a touchdown on this 4th and 31. It
Yeah.
happened, and you and I
Yeah.
at the same time just say it happened. But
Yeah.
again, just biggest takeaway, at least from the game for me, is Michigan looks like their floor is where it should be, where a lot of people think it should be finally, and that means that now their ceiling is, who knows what the ceiling is now, because people always talk about, oh, the ceiling of a program, the ceiling of a program. You got to build the floor first, and I think they finally done it. They've really finally done it. Even if they don't win the national championship, this is a really really impressive job to get to this point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, you said it perfectly, and it's a big credit to Harbaugh and that program to kind of continue to build, and also for the uh, the the shareholders and or not shareholders, but the people in charge over there at the University of Michigan, and the athletic directors and boosters and all that, to stay patient and stay the course, because there was a lot of moments during Harbaugh's run tenure that it looked a little shaky, where they couldn't beat Ohio State and they couldn't really win that big game, and they kind of continued the course and just slowly but surely, and we've seen this progression uh, with Michigan, where they kept, they made the playoffs. They finally beat Ohio State. They make the playoff. They get blown out. Next year they beat Ohio State. They make the playoff. They get dominated, but it wasn't. I mean, they made a valiant effort coming back. The game was a lot closer than it should have been at certain points of the game. And then back again, they beat Ohio State. They make the playoff, and finally they persevere and they break through and win that game. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of mistakes there by Michigan. Had every Michigan should have lost this game 9 times out of 10, and the fact that they didn't, it really goes to show, their resiliency and the way they. I mean, from the beginning of the game, like the very first pass, the very first play of the game was that very near interception by Caleb Downs, very first play of the game, and then next they go 3-and-out, they punt it away, and then they hold, and then they hold they as soon as they get a little bit of momentum, and it feel like this was the whole game. Actually, this was the entire game for Michigan. It felt like every time they got a little bit of momentum, something happened. They lost. They forced a 3-and-out by Alabama. They muff the punt. Bama gets the ball back 2 plays later, or 3 or 4 plays later, they score a touchdown. And then they answer back immediately with a touchdown, which they kept answering the bell and answering the call every single time they face any sort of adversity. But if you were to, if with shout out to Josh Pate, who has the padlock stats, and I was talking about this in the preview as well, is whoever dominates the line of scrimmage was going to win this game. And if you had told me before the game started, that Alabama's trenches, on both sides of the line, offensive and defensive line, were just going to be completely dominated, I would have thought that Michigan would win would win by 14 points, 21 points. But they won by 7 in overtime. So that just so many mistakes by Michigan in this game that it's almost and like you said, we talked about the in the chat about how we just assume that Saban's they're gonna win, that they're gonna end up winning the game, and there was plenty of moments in this game where it seemed that here comes the Saban voodoo, that muff punt at the end of the game. I put that in the chat as well. Like, watch, they're gonna muff the punt here, and sure enough, they did muff the punt. They were this close of it being a safety or recovered even for a touchdown that would have probably ended the game at that point. And Michigan just held on. They just held on to the rope. And what a way to answer in overtime. Just a classic Rose Bowl, man. The Rose Bowl is just incredible. Atmosphere in the game, just it never disappoints. And we got another classic, and it was exactly the way I felt it was going to go. Very, very slow burn, very just pounding at each other. The line of scrimmage, and neither of these quarterbacks are necessarily elite throwers of the football. So it was going to be one at the line of scrimmage, and at the end of the day, Michigan won the line of scrimmage. I mean, they had 6 sacks it was. Let me look. I had it here. I lost my stats. Where was it? I think it was 6 stats or 6 sacks. So so
sacks.
It was 6 sacks. Yeah. So they had 6 sacks on Jalen Milroe. And yeah, they, good for ESPN, good for Michigan and Coach Harbaugh for getting through that finally breaking that glass ceiling that they were facing for a long time, and reach the national championship game. But it's not over for them. They got a lot of they still got another game to play, so you got to regroup. So yeah, it was a hell of a game for sure.
Yeah, and
Was there? Go ahead.
just thinking about the sacks, it's not just the sacks too. They just had Milroe contained. Milroe had 63 rushing yards at the end, but it was on. And I don't know, like I'm looking at ESPN's box score, like it says 21 attempts for 63 yards, so they count sacks and stuff. But he had like a handful of big runs, but for the most part, it didn't feel like he was able to escape whenever he wanted, or that it was more just like he's running for his life. And just because Milroe is such a special athlete, he was just able to make something out of nothing sometimes. But it just wasn't enough. It wasn't him just running free. And especially like with the snapping issues that's been plaguing them all season. Again, like Milroe, I think he got spooked a bit where he'd take the snap and just like he'd freeze because he's like, okay, is the snap coming to me? Do I have the snap? Okay, now what's happening? And at that point, not to say that that's the reason Michigan's pressure worked, but Michigan's like, okay, we know what's happening. We can really tee off on them. Plus, it just felt like Michigan always had an answer to any little thing that Alabama was trying to do up front. And so at the end of the day, just because like McClellan and Milroe just are fast, and Justice Hayes, the freshman, has a little bit of juice too. They got a few things out of nothing, but it's like, man, Alabama just it looked like they were running for their life the entire time. Even in like the Iron Bowl, where it was America at the end, it wasn't like 100% of the time. It didn't feel like Alabama was just trying to scramble for dear life on every single thing. It's like they were able to hit some explosive plays. And it was wild to see. Again, Michigan on the other side just grounding and pounding, but yeah, that just wasn't Alabama that we've seen this year, where they've been able to hit explosives almost on command when they needed to. So yeah, that one shocked me a little bit because I thought Alabama would be able to, because their athletes are special, but Michigan's are special too. So
yeah, and it's kind of to me, it felt that this was a microcosm of Alabama's season. Just the Alabama team all year. They weren't dominant. They didn't they definitely were not the Alabama of the past, where they just were world beaters. Um, I always felt that they weren't good enough to be in this position. I surely didn't expect them to beat Georgia, and uh, they did it, and and in a similar fashion to this game as well. It's just Georgia made, as Michigan was able to avoid disaster from their turnovers, Georgia wasn't. But still, I mean, this doesn't. I mean, if you look through Alabama's season, they didn't really set the world on fire at any point. They had a lot of close games, even games that they really they dominated in, or just won convincingly. It wasn't, the 55s-0 that they used to have with Bryce Young and Tua Tagovailoa, and those types of games where it was it was 27-3 or 27-0, or but most of the games were slow burns, and they just kind of this is the way they played this season, and eventually it was going to catch up to them. Eventually it wasn't going to be enough. The Saban voodoo was not going to be enough, and at this point it wasn't. And shout out Michigan. I mean, they answered, like I said, they answered every single time that they felt they faced adversity. That every time Alabama got a sense of momentum, Michigan was able to counter that. And even though Michigan, like I said, a lot of times they gave away momentum when they got it. I mean, they recovered that Jalen Milroe fumble, then immediately they go, they don't really move the ball very well, and they miss a field goal. They stop them again. They stop Alabama and they muff the punt. They stop Alabama again with a chance to win the game. They muff the punt, get down at the 1 yard line. They have to take a knee and go to overtime. So they just answered the call every single time. And just another classic Rose Bowl with Michigan, moving on uh, to face the second team to make the college football playoff, which we kind of talked about it in the open. Your Washington Huskies. It's kind of a ironic, or kind of a storybook type of day here in Texas, in San Antonio, Texas. That it's been raining all day because the Longhorns did lose yesterday. So yeah, it's been a very gloomy, very sad day here. And I'm no Longhorns fan, but kind of just feels sad this morning or today. But yeah, another great game. I mean, almost the opposite of what we saw at the Rose Bowl, down in New Orleans in the Sugar Bowl. It was two offenses that could score, two explosive, quarterbacks who can, they could throw the football downfield. We saw two, the difference in quarterback play between the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl was, night and day. Two quarterbacks that could really get the ball downfield. You had a little bit more playmakers, on both sides, on both teams on offense. And I mean, you can't start to talk about the Sugar Bowl without talking about Michael Penix Jr. And I'll give you the floor because it is your Huskies and your quarterback, but what a performance by Michael Penix Jr. That was just unbelievable, what he did last night.
Yeah, so my biggest thing was I haven't seen Michael Penix Jr. move like he did since pre-injury at Indiana. Injuries, I should say. Multiple torn ACLs and shoulder injuries too, but the movement stuff is with his legs. I haven't seen him move like that. They called some RPOs where he kept it and ran right up the teeth of that vaunted Texas defensive line, terrifying defensive line. Avoided a bunch of sacks, had pressure, and he would just like scoot away, get the throw off, or he just like safely chuck it out of bounds. Again, just the pocket movement is something that we hadn't really seen. The offensive line for Washington, they won the Joe Moore Award for best offensive line. Penix, during his time at Washington, he's only been sacked, I cannot remember, it's either 11 or 15 times. Something crazy. And he was pressured 4 times in the first half against Texas. They had 0 sacks on him, and then I don't even think they had a sack I don't even remember. Just the biggest thing again was just the pocket movement, because we've seen him chuck it all year. We've seen him hit these lasers. And for me, as a Husky fan, Uh, even me, I was thinking that it's just because not that he himself he isn't a great player. I thought it was also because the offensive line was awesome, and he has 3 NFL wide receivers, and also, Jack Westover, who's just the most reliable human being. It's so crazy because that dude's like you look at him and you're just like, "Oh, he's just on the team because he's some local kid, whatever," but dude makes plays. Just the ball sticks to his hands. It's amazing. Uh, but yeah, the pocket movement from Penix was special, extremely special. And I saw people after the game talk about, "Oh, this Texas defensive line, where were they at?" It's like they were trying. They had him a few
Yes.
times, and it wasn't like crazy. It wasn't a crazy like, "Oh, shake them off like Cam Newton." It wasn't, "Oh, I'm gonna juke them like Lamar Jackson." It wasn't like Tom Brady. Wasn't like Tom Brady subtle pocket movements. It was kind of like weird little jerk movements, like weird. Just I haven't really seen a player do it, but I think also just the weird movements just had Texas defenders going, "What is this?" Also, because they probably haven't seen it on film because he's again, I haven't seen him do this in forever. Uh, I always thought he had it in him, but since it's been years, I'm like, man, that's the biggest thing I was afraid of in this Texas game was the pressure's going to get to him, just because they are that talented, and they never did because of him. Yes, the offensive line did great, but he had a lot of plays individually where he was able to move. And I know that's such a nerdy thing to talk about, but that's such an important thing too, especially going to this next game against we just talked about. Um, Michigan's pass rush just contained Jalen Milrow. That
Yeah.
and Penix can move a little bit, but he ain't no Jalen Milrow. There's not that many players in college football or in the NFL who are Jalen Milrow. So
Yeah.
that was the biggest thing to me. I mean, that's not the biggest. That's one of the biggest things to me. Um, where they did that. Even though Washington did its best at the end of the game to give it right back to Texas. And 1 second left for Texas and they had that play. And if it's a laser from Ewers, I know he was pressured a little bit, but if Ewers can step into it and laser that to Mitchell, that's a touchdown. And then who knows? Maybe they missed the extra point because that game was so crazy. But yeah, that's my biggest takeaways. Um, and I could keep talking, but I'm gonna let you have the floor a little bit here too.
Yeah, I mean it's I'm looking here at, at the box score, and one of the things I said in the preview was explosive plays. With both of these quarterbacks and both of these offenses that have the capability to have explosive plays, which team was going to be able to limit those plays. Um, and looking at Michael Penix Jr.'s um, average pass, um, it's 11.3, or average yards per pass 11.3. So he was getting the ball downfield, and he had a lot of big chunk plays downfield. I mean, one of the first plays of the game it was a 70 yard, 73 yard, pass completion, that kind of set up their first score. So, it was just explosive, off the gate, and they didn't they got shaky there a little bit, toward in the second half, where they kind of got stopped a few times, but they kept pushing, and they kept that relentless pressure, they kept their foot on the gas and just kind of wore down that Texas defense. And yeah, I mean, they almost gave that away, which is, um, you know, it, if AD Mitchell comes down with that pass, at the end of the game, we're having a completely different conversation of how, Washington completely handed that game to Texas. I mean, you're up by 14, 13 points in the fourth quarter with less than 7 minutes to play, or 6 minutes to play, or whatever it was, and you're this close of losing. Um, that kick catch interference call was just not smart football. Um, you got to be aware of the game, and where you are. But yeah, I mean, Michael Penix Jr. just showed out. It reminded me a little bit of CJ Stroud last year, where going into that game, they kind of talked about, if Georgie can make CJ Stroud run, he can't. He hasn't really shown he can do things with his legs. He hasn't really shown he can do, he can under pressure, or getting movement. And Georgia did exactly that, and CJ Stroud made him pay for it. I mean, he was just I had never seen CJ Stroud be able to scramble and be that elusive in the pocket the way he was in that semifinal game last year. Um, and it almost resulted in them winning. And it's similar to what you were saying about Michael Penix Jr. that he showed that ability that he hasn't really shown much of. He's quick. Like you said, he's no Jalen Milroe, but I think he just took that to another level. Last night where he was able to avoid pressure and he was able to make plays. Um, with his legs and with a collapsing pocket and find the throws and not panic. Um, you know, that's something that we saw in the Rose Bowl with both quarterbacks. Even especially JJ McCarthy was just kind of panicking as soon as he saw pressure. Michael Penix Jr. did not do that, and it allowed him to continue to run the offense and find the receivers and go through his progressions even with a collapsing pocket. But it was without Michael Penix Jr. they don't win this football game, and that's easy to say because he's a quarterback. But I don't think you with stats aside, just the fact that it was Michael Penix Jr. Being the quarterback is they don't. Otherwise, if it was anybody else with the same stats but not the same, IQ, I would say they don't win that football game. You know what I mean? Um, he just there were the margin was razor thin last night, and if you had told me that Michael Penix, like, again, he threw for 430 yards, and I would say, oh, Washington completely dominated, but the margin was razor thin, so that just elevates his decision making and his play, um, just that much, just that one play difference between winning and losing. Uh, that's when the elite players make a difference, and he definitely played like an elite quarterback last night. So yeah, it was incredible. It was a great game. Two just incredible games to put a cap on the 14 playoff. We couldn't have asked for better football games, in my opinion. Do you agree?
Yeah, like last year, um, people were talking about that was the greatest two semifinal games in a row, capped by the Georgia Ohio State Classic. Um, but again, the TCU Michigan one, that one was also pretty fun. But this one was two very different games, uh, with very different teams. But at the end of the day, it had a little bit of everything. It was good coaching, bad coaching, great plays by players, horrible, just mind-boggling mistakes that happen because people are human, all kinds of things. Um, and even like the weird rule things like that, the injury to Johnson at the end, which allowed the time to stop. I remember like I had remembered that was a rule, or I knew that was a rule, but like I hadn't really thought about it. So, and there was like talk about like why didn't Washington need the ball, and they're comparing to the Cristobal thing with Miami. So there's the different levels. So the Cristobal Miami one is like number one, like you don't know what you're doing with clock management. Um, this one with Washington, I'd put number two, and then the one that Cristobal had with Oregon and Stanford a few years back, that's third. Because the whole thing was like, I have it here. There's multiple decisions, like end of the or beginning of the fourth quarter, Washington's up 31-21. 3rd and 5, they get a false start and an incomplete pass. So on 4th and 10, they kick the field goal to go up 13. But then there's a offsides on Texas, and I thought, oh, this is an easy. Washington accepts it and then goes for it, and then they didn't, which was shocking to me because like I know Texas has been kind of struggling to move the ball, but I don't know, probably should have gone for it there. And then it builds up, and then there's the whole thing at the end where Washington has the 3rd and 10. If you just run the ball, what Texas has to take its second time out, and then you save time there, or you knock off time there, and then there was the unfortunate Johnson injury, where if you had made Texas call it second time out, you never have to run that Johnson play. I wrote about it in like the instant recap where it's basically like you run Johnson, assume like he doesn't get hurt. There's about like maybe 15 seconds left, as opposed to this is rough math. And then if you had made Texas call it second timeout, um, on the drive before that, um, there's like then 10 seconds left or something like that. So it's 50-50. Like it's all kinds of things there where I understand people saying that Washington should just need the ball out and then at the end just like do some punt or something. But I understand running for it because you never know what happens. But then I do also see that, yeah, maybe you just kind of knew, hey, let's just get out of here. Because Johnson has been dealing with a foot injury for the last bit of the season, and he was seen walking around after the game with a boot on. So that's a good sign, hopefully, even though he was carted off. But yeah, at the very end, Washington, just their aggressiveness, just it almost got them. So, but yeah, it was that's like you were saying, this semifinals had everything. So yeah, I'd agreed with you. Get back to your original point. Yeah, this was the two best semifinals we've had. There have been some good semifinals, but never like back to back good. But yeah, these were two classics, which was awesome to see. Just so much fun.
Yeah, yeah, it was incredible. Yeah, I mean, there were so many plays too where, the fumble, the uh the Jaden Blue fumble, in the fourth quarter when Washington up by 13 points. I thought at that point, okay, the game's over. There were so many times during this game that I thought the game was over, and it just can't, it just wasn't. It just, like that. I thought the game was over there. Um, you know, and then when Texas got held to a field goal late, they kicked the field goal with like a minute to go. And they didn't score. I was like, okay, well, that's the game's over at that point. Um, and then it just wasn't. It wasn't like, yeah, it honestly too, like that play with uh uh Johnson. Just if you're just running the clock out, why does he, like, you don't even need him in the game? Just if he's hobbling, just take him out of the game. Don't even have him in there. Have somebody else run the ball. Just tell him, run the ball, hold on to it, don't fumble. Just fall on it. That's don't if his injury was, his foot was that much of a concern, then don't even have him in the game. But yeah, yeah, I think both. This is, I feel like both of these games are a play or two away from being opposite results, and we'd be having a completely different conversation, today. And that's just yeah. I mean, there's nothing more you can ask for. I do want to say this, and I don't know if it's just me, and maybe you can attest to it, but you might be a little bit biased because you are watching Washington, play, but I don't know if it's just like watching these two games, there was two completely different vibes to them. Like when like I said, like the Rose Bowl felt like the main event. It felt like a play. It felt like an important game. Every single play felt like there was so much weight behind it, and I never felt that in the Sugar Bowl. And I don't know if it's because it's the Rose Bowl and the pageantry behind it kind of just adds to it. Um, or I don't know what it was. And it just like when I was watching the Sugar Bowl, it did, even though it was a really close game and it was a really entertaining game, I didn't feel the magnitude of it the way that I felt. It almost felt sterile compared to the Rose Bowl. And I don't know. I've always been a big uh, advocate of having more games played in college football venues or stadiums. Like I'm not the big fan of playing the national championship in NRG Stadium in Houston or in Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis or SoFi. I mean, I get it; it's a big game, it's a national championship game. But when you have stadiums that hold over 100,000 people all over the country who have history and pageantry behind them, why not? I don't see why they don't play their call. Like leave those stadiums for Super Bowls, for those corporate events. Like the Super Bowl is a corporate event at this point. It's completely unaffordable for the common people to go to these games anyway. Which is not point of this conversation. But I don't know if it was just me, but it just felt different between the two games. And it could also be the opponents. Michigan and Alabama have this kind of history behind them. I know Texas. Texas and Washington or I mean, Texas more is more of a national brand than Washington is, as of late or historically. But I don't know. I don't know if it was. Do you agree with that? Do you like? What is your take on that?
Yeah, I think so I know some people don't believe in giving free shout outs. I don't care. I think free shout outs are good. It helps build the brand. So shout out to Splits on Duo podcast. Last night, Richard Jefferson, Alex Christian talked about it, where the Rose Bowl only has like 5,000 like corporate seats that they give out, as opposed to if you
Yeah,
look at like all the other one big games, they give out as many corporate whatever things as possible. And I think another thing too is yes, the Rose Bowl has kind of like they've been a stick in the mud, and they have been one of the they've been one of the main reasons that the playoffs took a while to expand from 4 to 12, and they didn't want 4 in the first place. And the Rose Bowl like hammers home, we are starting at this time so that the sunset happens and everyone gets the classic thing, third quarter into fourth quarter. And like they've been a pain, but also I get it because the Rose Bowl is cool. Okay, the Rose Bowl is awesome. I completely understand,
yeah,
and like I think it's just a simple thing too, where a lot of the corporate games or stuff like that, it's um indoors, artificial lighting, just it if you it looks the same. Everything looks the same. The Rose Bowl is very signature, and it's outdoors and all that. I know it's just simple indoor, outdoor. There's the whole thing like open the state, open the roof, close the roof, but there is something about like just the look, the difference. Like Staples Center, when the Clippers play or whatever it's called, crypto, whatever. I'll call it Staples Center. Staples when the Clippers play, all the lights
yeah.
are on. It's bright. When the Lakers play, they have that like it's the arena. It's everything's dark. It's just on the court. It's just
It's a
the way that
theatrical performance.
exactly. And that's part of the thing too. Like college football and college sports is the pageantry. It's the special things that they're able to do. And shout out to the networks too, like the presentation and stuff. When you have these special places like the Rose Bowl, um, like hopefully like when they're able to host games on campus, like when it's going to be hosted in Alabama, in LSU, in Clemson, and all these special stadiums as opposed to these ones that all these domes and or indoor stadiums that just all look the same. It's such a special thing that adds to it so much. Um, so yeah, you're right, and it's kind of a sappy thing, and it's nostalgic, and some people are like, well, if you put Texas and Washington on the Rose Bowl grass, it's going to slow down the players, which is true. Like fast turf versus grass, you're going to run faster on turf and everything, but and maybe the game's lesser, but then everything's just the same. That and the whole point is the difference in college football and all these special things that make college football special. Um, even as they make it so everything more the same and just focus on the postseason. There's still all these special things that college football has that even other college sports and certainly not professional sports in America at least that they just don't have. So yeah, you're right. It's just the Rose Bowl and all the other things, but focusing on the Rose Bowl, it's just a special setting which matters a whole lot. Um, yeah, again like going from the Rose Bowl to it was literally the harsh lighting of I think it was Katie George interviewing Steve Sarkisian right before the game. It's just the harshest artificial lighting. Oh, my eyes, this looks weird. Like I know it's simple, but that stuff matters. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one who feels that way because it really did like they made such a big difference, in that game. And especially when it's a college football playoff game at the Rose Bowl, and it just adds even that extra layer on top of the already grand, spectacle that it is. You know, we were unfortunately, because of COVID, we were the last time that rotation came through, they had to play it in Dallas, and it it obviously did not feel like it doesn't. I don't even count it as a Rose Bowl. I mean, with when Alabama and Notre Dame played it in Arlington for the Rose Bowl, that didn't count. Like I was telling, I as a Georgia fan, I was kind of talking I was talking some shit about how like Georgia's the last team, the last real team to win the last real SEC team to win a Rose Bowl, because the one in Arlington doesn't count. And even as a college football fan, I feel that because it did it. I mean, the game is just different. It's just different when it's there. And I mean, even when you mentioned like the game slows down, but when we did have Georgia and Oklahoma play, it was 54 to 40. It was 54 to 47 was the or something like that was the final score, 51 to 47 or something like. So it was a high, it was a high score. It was a high scoring game. So yeah, I do feel next year when we do have some of these playoff games on campus, it's just going to make it even more. It's just going to make it even more special. Um, and we're still going to get these games. We're still going to get, and now we're going to get college football playoff games at the Rose Bowl every year because it's part of. It's either going to be a quarterfinal or it's going to be a semifinal game. I'd even argue. I think Herb Street earlier today said that the national championship game should be at the Rose Bowl every year. Um, and I don't disagree with that. I really don't. I feel like there's no better venue in college football than the Rose Bowl, the pinnacle of it, of our sport is at the Rose Bowl. I don't disagree with that. I mean, I do feel I get why they do have the rotations around. Is to obviously it's money and corporate. They have to pay the bills and sponsors and stuff like that. And you know, I get it, but yeah, not to hijack this podcast on just Rose Bowl fan fiction. Uh, it's yeah, it was just incredible. It's just the atmosphere is just completely different, and you know, as a cultural fan, I guess I just never really noticed it, before, uh, or at least not as much as I did this year. Uh, I really felt it this year because it was a good game. It could have been easily because the last time this happened, like I said in 2017, the Sugar Bowl wasn't really a good game between Alabama and Clemson. It wasn't that great of a game. We had this just amazing game between Oklahoma and Georgia, and then you have Alabama and Clemson in the Sugar Bowl, and it wasn't really that good of a game. So I just attested that the game wasn't as good. But we had two amazing games, and they were both. Uh, it just didn't feel the same, in my opinion. Uh, but anyway, I digress. We're down to our final game of the year. The national championship is set after 4 months uh, of games. We've got to it. I don't know if anybody could have predicted this matchup at the beginning of the year between um, Washington and Michigan. That's similar to last year. I don't know if anybody could predict the TCU being in the national championship. I hope it doesn't result in anything like that. But yeah. What is your early takes on the national championship come Monday night?
I'll talk about the Sugar Bowl more, but this will answer your question. So all night, Texas had been able to run the ball effectively with the running backs. But at the end of the day, if you look at I'm like just reading over my play chart again. I charted every play, which was kind of wild, but a fun way to do it. If you want to do that, it helps you really learn the flow. And I know people have doing this for a while, but like it's kind of fun. I've never actually done it. But anyways, CJ Baxter, 9 carries, 64 yards, 1 touchdown, 7.1 a carry. Jaden Blue, 9 carries, 59 yards, 6.6 yards a carry. But do you notice how many carries they got? 9 and 9.
Yeah.
And something clicked in my head. I was writing the instant recap last night. I'm like, didn't Sarkisian do this before in a big game? And it was the national championship game where he was the interim offensive coordinator for Alabama when they played Clemson when it was the 1 second left ran for a touchdown. So if y'all remember, Bo Scarborough had ran all over Washington in the semifinal game. And then Lane Kiffin had taken the FAU job or the Ole Miss. I can't remember which is which, but he had taken the job, and Nick Saban said, "Just take the job, whatever, get out of here." Because Lane, everyone knows Lane's kind of a knucklehead, and like Saban appreciates his offense, but wanted him out. So Sarkisian took over, and I threw out the final drive where Jalen Hurts runs it in with just over 2 minutes left. Take out that drive. In the second half, Sarkisian in that national championship game only called 9 rushing plays. and only 5 of them were for Bo Scarborough. And it was a close game. And there was like a few I said 9. There were like a few where it's like Jalen Hurts runs. So I didn't know whether those were scrambles or design runs. I didn't have time to go back and look. So it's 9, but maybe add like 4 more runs. But yeah, that's not a
Yeah.
lot. And if you could look at the play charts for that game, it's like run for 5 yards. Cool. Incomplete, incomplete, punt. And then like throw, incomplete, incomplete, punt. They got like one long touchdown to OJ Howard for 86 yards, but that was it. I think sometimes like Sarkisian just he's gotten a lot better this year, but there was talk last year where it's like he's good in the first half or he's got all this stuff. It's not necessarily just well, apparently he scripts out the first 40 plays. It's once he gets past the scripted stuff, he's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Pass. Pass. Just let's throw it. It's like, I get it. You have good great wide receivers. Ewers is really good. I think Ewers is really good. Um, but just run the ball. And you know what, Michigan, to get to your question, my early thought is, do you know what Michigan's not gonna do? They're not gonna just pass it for no reason. They're gonna run,
Yeah.
and they're gonna run, and they're gonna run some more. And Corum isn't like a game-breaking speed guy, but if there's 5 yards, Corum's gonna get you 5 yards. If there's a little hole, he'll get you a quick 20, and yeah, he'll get chased down. He doesn't have burner speed, but he's gonna get that 20. Donovan Edwards, he's been a little lackluster this year as compared to last year, but Edwards can take it and go. McCarthy might be the fastest player on their team. That dude is terrifying. And so they're going to run. And I don't know if Washington has the dudes up front, and I think they showed it. It's not just up front, linebackers, safety. Just if you just run right up the middle, that's the old adage of like, how do you keep a good offense off the field? You keep the ball for a long time. And
Yeah.
Michigan, that's Michigan to a T. Just run it. And Michigan will be perfectly fine if it's a 17-17 game late in the fourth quarter, if it's been a grind out thing. That's how they play. They get in the muck. Washington has shown that they can play these tight games. They had the Apple Cup against Washington State where it's like it was 21-21, just disgusting. The offense wasn't really working. They barely squeezed out, and I know it's Arizona State, but they survived against Arizona State where Penix had the worst game of his entire career, including Indiana. But yeah, Michigan has the recipe, and they're gonna see it. Texas was able to run, but then they just got away from it for some reason. We just run, and we're gonna do that. So, and this isn't just like a reverse jinx. Oh, I'm doubting my team. I'm thinking about this too much. It's really just I saw a game like this already. The Seahawks and the Broncos. I'm a Seahawks fan. I saw it. That Broncos offense was terrifying. I thought it was going to be a close game because, like, oh man, this passing attack, this is something the Seahawks haven't seen all year. And then the Seahawks just ran the ball, just hit a few explosive plays with the wide receivers, just use their defense, just suffocate the insane passing offense, and that was it. I hope this game isn't going to be a blowout. I hope it's close. Even if it's close, Washington lost. That's just more entertaining, and honestly, that's better in the long run. But yeah, I don't see a way where Washington can stop Michigan's running game, and Michigan can dominate on the ground. That can just set off a whole chain of events where Michigan comes out on top. But that's my early thing. Who knows? But that's my early feeling on it.
You know, the best way to stop a team from running the ball is to make them play catch up.
Yes.
And I feel like Washington's offense is explosive enough and has the capability of playing you know, quick strike where, you know, you blink, it's 7 minutes to go in the first quarter and it's 14-0 Washington. You know, they got the ball first, score, maybe a stop, you know, got a 3-and-out, or maybe they were able to get a stop, and then boom, score again. And then you're already ahead of the 8 ball, right? You're forcing JJ McCarthy to throw and to pass the ball. And you know, JJ McCarthy is a very capable quarterback. You cannot win football games by making JJ McCarthy throw the football 40, 50 times a game. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that's what it's gonna take, but I'm saying if Washington forces JJ McCarthy or what forces Michigan and JJ McCarthy to have to throw the football, whether it's by stopping the run, which broke it down is going to be a lot easier said than done, or by getting ahead and forcing them to play catch up. Um, and you know, are they capable of doing that? I don't know. But just from what I saw there's two things that I saw last night that are kind of making me lean towards Michigan a little bit. At least, my early reaction, not even 24 hours later, is the the front seven of Michigan being able to give Alabama just give them headaches all game. And Michael Penix, you mentioned it. Michael Penix Jr. is not Jalen Milroe. I don't know if he's going to be able to get out of those sacks and as effectively as he did against Texas, and as effectively as Jalen Milroe did in the Rose Bowl. And uh, two is that Washington secondary got very vulnerable at times last night. They gave up big plays. They gave up, you know, just they were able to they were the Texas was able to find these holes in the defense, this soft spot on the defense to move the ball downfield. And a quarterback like JJ McCarthy, like I said, he's not an elite thrower of the football. He cannot, he's not gonna, throw at tight windows and just, be Caleb Williams out there, be, Aaron Rodgers out there, but he's a capable, he can throw the football semi-effectively when given that when he's able to take what the defense gives him. You saw yesterday with that when Blake Corum got out on that uh, I can't remember the name of the play. He got out, he threw him, he got 30 yards or whatever. That got called back with the block in the back. If he can find those soft spots in the defense, that'll complement the running game even more. And then it'll be Washington cannot let this game fall into Michigan style football. Ground and pound. They're not built for that. Alabama was built for that, but Washington isn't. So my early gut feeling is thinking Michigan is probably has the edge today. But I mean, we're a week away. We're 6 days away, so a lot of things can happen. A lot of things can change. But I will say that I said this about TCU last year, and I feel and I think it's very underrated quality, or a very underrated thing people don't really talk about when it comes to football teams, is their ability to win close games. And people want to knock teams for winning a lot of close games, but I don't think it's a knock at all. I think it's a testament to the way that team finishes and the way that team does under pressure. And I'm looking at Washington. I mean, since 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 early in the season against Arizona, when they 31-24 against Arizona, 36-33 Oregon, 15-7 Arizona State. They 42-33 Stanford, 52-42 against USC. 35-28 against Utah, 22-20 against Oregon State, 24-21 against Washington State, 34-31 against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game, and then 37-31 against Texas. There's a lot of close games there, and like I said, people don't really think about that or they like to use it as a negative, or like, oh, they've barely squeaked by. They're not that good. They haven't really beat anybody. But I think that's almost a trait that they're able to win those close games, because a lot of teams can't, and they kind of crumble under the pressure. So yeah, I think it's going to be. I think it'll be a good game. I think if Michigan starts playing their brand of football, and Washington kind of falls into that brand of football, it'll get late early. I think you're looking at a double-digit Michigan win at that point. But if Washington can kind of lean on that explosive offense and kind of have Michigan play catch up, they have a chance at that point. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. And we'll have a full breakdown later on in the week as well. We'll once it gets closer. But I mean, the line is 4.5. So Michigan is favored by 4.5, which is more than what they were favored against Alabama. So yeah, we'll see. But I'm excited. It's going to be a hell of a game. What a way to cap off this 4-team playoff era with 2 undefeated teams going at it. One of these teams is going to join. I think there's only been 3 other teams in the college football playoff era that have gone 15-0. I think it was Clemson, 2 Clemson teams. Oh no, LSU, Clemson, and Georgia. And then one of these 2 teams is going to join those ranks. So that's pretty impressive to go 15-0. It's very hard to do. And yeah, it's going to be. I can't wait. So, yeah, that's all. We'll talk more about it when we break it down a little bit more thoroughly in our breakdown. But any last words for you? What the floor is yours to close this out.
Yeah, kind of like you said, it could get late early. A lot of games, especially like big time matchups, the first quarter is kind of a feeling out thing where you kind of like see, oh, you might have a few things up your sleeves, but you're kind of feeling out the other team. This is the kind of game where Pete Carroll, Seattle's coach, has this whole thing. People have probably seen it. It's, can you win the game in the first quarter? No. Can you win the game in the second quarter? No. Can you win the game in the third quarter? No. And then he goes, can you win the game in the fourth quarter? And then the locker room goes crazy and they go, yeah. This is the kind of game where you have to win the first quarter. You win the first quarter, that sets you up. Like you were saying, both these teams, their styles of play perfectly go against each other, at least offensively. So whoever can win the first quarter, and if they can dominate the first quarter, that could set everything the rest of the way. So this might, of course, people are going to be watching from the kickoff. And maybe if you think you might be running a little late from work or something, just get out early. Just call in sick. Watch from kickoff on, because you might miss key moments that set up the other 3 quarters and maybe beyond if we get in overtime. Who knows? But yeah, this is one where styles make fights, and this is going to be a really fun fight. At least I hope, and hope the Huskies win. But I just hope for college football and everything, it's a really, really good game.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's gonna be fun, and I can't wait. We're countdown is on. I think it's 30 minutes. So 30 minutes from now, in 6 days, 30 minutes from now, if I said that right. It's at 6:30 p.m. Central Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, the 8th. So the clock is ticking as we get closer to what should be a great game. But that'll be it for us here. We hope you enjoyed it. We're almost. I really can't believe it's already the end of the season. It's insane how quick the season went. And I'm excited for a new era of college football coming next season. So we'll break down the championship game. We'll break down after the championship game, and we'll talk about who's crowned the victor at the end of the night on Monday night, and we'll be there to cover it all. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Please share it with your friends. We like to do this. We love this sport, and we like to share it with everybody who also loves the sport. So that's it for me, and y'all have a good night.
Texas is back, and I don't mean that in a rude way.